Dudes like Houdini. Seriously, when the going gets tough, you don't want a criminal lawyer, right? You want a criminal lawyer. Know what I'm saying?
Saul, Saul, you better call Saul. He'll fight for your rights when your back's to the wall. Take it to the man, justice for all. You better call Saul. You best call now, you hear?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new show here at the Roundabout Cast.
We're live.
The Journey with Jimmy Branch, name in progress, but I think we're gonna stick with that one, where we talk about the hit show Better Call Saul, but not as hit as it should be, which maybe we can help with that.
Yeah, it seems like the Vince Gilligan's last masterpiece. It seemed to blow up more when when Breaking Bad's first season came out compared to this.
Well, so with Breaking Bad, it actually didn't really blow up until season 4.
Oh,
Where it started hitting Netflix. Breaking Bad was a late bloomer, and even now it has a resurgence with how shitty the ending of, say, Game of Thrones and other TV shows are.
people are like, "Oh, let's go back and watch a good
I thought you were
TV
gonna
show."
say El Camino, but okay.
No, El Camino's good. Oh,
Unpopular opinion. El Camino good. Everyone go listen to our talk on it.
yeah. So I don't know how popular these talks will be, considering our Breaking Bad talk was criminally underrated. But the Better Call Saul subreddit, I'm in there. You guys are pretty keen for some discussion. So hopefully we'll get some good comments to go along with this.
Maybe.
So going into this, we have a really cool dynamic going on here.
Yeah.
All three of us kind of have a different experience going into this. You have Willer, who is a veteran. He has watched Breaking Bad. He's watched Better Call Saul, and this will be a rewatch for him.
Yes, this is my third or fourth rewatch.
Yeah. You have me, who has watched Breaking Bad before. It is my favorite TV show, and I will be watching Better Call Saul for the first time. So this will not be a rewatch for me. This is a first time viewing. And then Joe is even an entirely different dynamic.
I ain't seen shit.
Yeah, he has not watched Breaking Bad. He is going to be going into Better Call Saul, which fortunately, despite being labeled as a prequel, this does kind of stand on its own, I think.
So far.
So far.
Well, that's going to be really fun to hear because there's already a couple of things that are callbacks to Breaking Bad, or call forwards maybe.
Yeah, that's the one thing. When I was watching it, going into this, I don't want this to be the which is Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad podcast. I really want this to be. I don't want to talk about Breaking Bad too much. I want us to really focus on Better Call Saul. So I wanted to treat this kind of independently. But when I was watching, I did notice there were lots of callbacks where if you had watched both series, maybe certain scenes would be more impactful just because you're like, oh, I know who this person is and where they eventually get in life.
Well, there's an element of who lives to make the show.
Yeah.
But more importantly, you start asking, wait, why aren't these characters here? And I think that's where the drama comes from, if you have watched Breaking Bad.
So I think in some capacity, I want to try to 80% analyze it as its own independent show, separate from what, aired before it. But there probably are going to be times where I'll also want to analyze it as a prequel.
Yeah, there will be times. Namely, we're going to talk about episodes 1 through 3 as a little trial run here. I think episode 2 and 3 have some pertinent Breaking Bad discussion times. Yes, Joe, turn me down. All right, so the way we're going to do this, and this might be a secret to y'all as well.
It is.
I went through the show. I'm rewatching it as I do. I have labeled every scene.
Ooh.
So every major scene, we can go through them one by one. And if you have something to talk about during that scene, you can. If you don't, that's cool too. Generally, I'll have something to say, some scenes more than other.
Okay.
Cool. Hold on. just getting some technical difficulties here on
Oh,
some
Mark.
ends, but regardless, we can get started with episode 1 dash or 1 by 1, season 1, episode 1, Uno. Uh, I don't know if you've noticed, but every episode in this season ends with the letter O. That's just the naming scheme that they went with.
Oh,
Oh, it doesn't really mean much, except for one episode where I think they wanted to call it Jello, but they couldn't because of branding issues, so they just gave up. They just called it Alpine Shepherd Boy, which is completely thrown off. But
foreshadowing, the main villain is the letter O.
yeah, a big donut.
Big Bird says, Better Call Saul is brought to you by the letter O.
So Better Call Saul opens up with a flash forward of who I know as Gene. I think you can only tell so far if you look at his name tag.
Gene.
And
Yeah.
Gene would be Saul post Breaking Bad. Bradley, well, I guess I have a question for both of y'all. Bradley, what did you think? Did you immediately tell that this was a flash forward, or did you think it was a flashback at first? Joe, did this confuse you? Did this have any significance to you whatsoever?
All I knew is that, like, obviously this wasn't taking place in the current time, and that's about it. I really wasn't confirmed that was in the future or the past until the very end of that segment. We were like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, I had actually forgot that this character's new identity eventually becomes Gene. I forgot the name was Gene, but I did know that it was him. So I pretty quickly I was like, okay, clearly this is in the future after or later on in Better Call Saul, and he's looking back on he obviously pulls out the tapes and he's going to be reflecting, and then that's when we go back in time to where our story actually starts.
Yeah, so so with this scene, I really like how it's shot in black and white. So I think that might make you think it's a flashback, but
Yeah.
it's a flash forward, and I think the black and white is very clearly there to show you how grim the situation is, or how devoid of joy his life has become.
And Vince Gilligan is very often a fan of showing us the end point first and then going back and then going back to the beginning.
That's true.
And I feel like that can be a very tough thing to pull off, but I think
I thought the thing about the black and white is that's the absence of color. It's the lack of anything meaningful or colorful in his life now, and now you're at a point where like everything's just the same, monotone and black and white, to the point where the only time we start to see color is when he turns the TV on again to watch his old commercials and he gets lit up by that colored screen.
Ooh.
God, I didn't even notice the TV had color after 4 watches.
Yeah. Joe coming out here with the
And very obviously, when he watches the TV, you can tell that he's longing for the past, and the words that he's saying to himself from the past, it's like, have enemies of injustice gotten to you? I can help you. Better call Saul. And he's just like, look at who I was. Look who I am now. So it's really hitting hard.
Yeah. I don't know anything about Saul or Jimmy. I just, all I know is that his life was better then than it is now, comparatively.
To him, it was. Well, Joe, I guess we'll do you want to know? Like,
I assume he gets caught and then is like, I gotta make a new identity, and then he makes a new identity with himself after going through a whole thing with Jesse and the boys.
yes, and Walter and the boy. I think we have to talk about it a little bit because there's one thing to bring up with Bradley. So, do you remember it's episode 14 of season 5? Saul, it's the last time we see Saul. He's saying goodbye to Walter, and Walter's like, no, he's coming with me. And it's over when we say we're over and all that conversation. Saul says, best case scenario, in 6 months, I'm a manager of a Cinnabon up in Omaha.
Oh.
He drops that line, and that's why he followed through with it. He got his best case scenario.
From the like Breaking Bad writer's room behind the scenes podcast that you had showed me, you had first mentioned this to me, and then I was able to actually kind of listen to it, where they would talk about all these plot points with Saul, or they'd have interesting ideas, and they would always say like, oh, that'll they would joke and say, oh, that's something we'll do in the spin-off series. That's something we'll do in the spin-off series. And then they eventually did make a spin-off series, and they actually can fit all these things they wanted to do for Saul/Jimmy into it.
Indeed.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
Yes.
And this is related to the production of Breaking Bad. Did Saul come in as like a permanent character at the beginning, or was he kind of like a character they threw in and got really good reception, or they really liked him, and then they added him more later?
I think mostly that. I think characters like Jesse and Mike. Mike, you should know because he's in the show as well. He's the ticket guy who always denies Jimmy. Characters like them were mostly because they did so well. Saul, I think, was mixed. I think he got more screen time because he was so liked, but they needed a lawyer character in Breaking Bad. There's some stuff where like Saul was supposed to take over the role of Mike, but then Mike did so good that Saul got different roles. It's a whole thing. Watch that. That's a cool podcast, their production podcast.
Yeah.
But to answer your question a little bit further, Saul comes in season 2 pretty early on for Breaking Bad, which is not where you got, as far as I remember you saying you got.
I got like the first 3 or 4 episodes, I think.
And I guess to answer that, I gave up on Joe watching Breaking Bad. I don't think it's really his thing, but I think Better Call Saul might be, so that's why I dragged them along with us. Because Jimmy is just a more likable character, and I feel like with Breaking Bad, as soon as you know that, he's heard me and Bradley talk about it enough to where it's like, as soon as you know that Walter's not supposed to be the most relatable character at times, I think the mystique comes off, and you'll know if it's not your kind of show at that point.
But I think Joe, I think Better Call Saul might be up Joe's alley too, because
I mean,
watching Better Call Saul, it's clear that both of these shows were made by a lot of the same team of people, but there are some big differences between them.
Which I'll highlight as we go. All right, on to the opening scene where we actually meet Jimmy. This one is an interesting scene because it's just dead silent. There's so much wordless comedy in this scene, with the way that so Jimmy comes in super late, comes into this huge speech.
I don't think he's late. I think he took an extended recess.
Possibly. He's late from his recess either way.
Yeah, he's late from his recess. He's not.
Yeah. And the bailiff has to go get him, and he comes in immediately going off on this really nice tangent. Oh, what it was like to be 19 and all this Jimmy tomfoolery. And I love how the prosecutor trumps his entire research speech without a single word. He just comes out, plays the evidence. As he's playing the evidence, people are walking out of the room, so you just get a sense that this is not going to be pretty to watch.
Yeah.
And then those dumb fuck kids.
They fucked ahead.
They fucked ahead.
It's Jimmy's at times he can be a very clever or silver-tongued individual, but there are some cases where there's only so far that's going to get you.
I think a big part of that section was Jimmy was trying to get them fully acquitted. That was his goal. It's not until episode 2 that we have this first character change with his methodologies when it comes to the court.
Yeah. It's hard to say if that's something he would always go to. He was definitely going for it.
I think that was kind of the point, because it brings up, because it happens later where he has this kind of, he's really frustrated when it comes to being a lawyer. And he's kind of really down. Like he's about to go back into his slipping Jimmy ways. So I think the inference you're supposed to get is that he's trying really hard to be like an ace attorney kind of lawyer, just trying to get them off the hook all the time. And he's almost forcing himself into having a moral compass when he really doesn't. Does that make sense?
Man, Joe, from 3 episodes, I think you're getting it. I think I was wise to bring you along. Moving on, if nothing else is to be said about that opening scene, which I like very much. We have the scene where Jimmy meets the Kettleman. What is your thoughts on the Kettleman couple? Betsy and Craig, I believe.
They, I mean, they seemed like aloof white people, which I think is what they are.
I think while I was watching this episode, I think I was also like, I might have been reading a Warhammer like index or something, or writing something down for my game.
What could
earlier
be
in
the
week.
connection here? Oh, okay, so you weren't paying attention.
I wasn't paying too much attention. I was really paying attention.
No,
but,
fair.
like,
Clearly.
during this scene, I can't remember or not if they mentioned the embezzlement, because when they mentioned it later, I was like, oh, that's a shock.
They skirt around it. Jimmy brings it up. It's like, but you guys didn't do it. Like, no money was stolen, they say. One thing I particularly like in this scene is how you can tell how Betsy is so controlling of the relationship.
Yeah.
From when Craig's about to write it, and you get that zoom in on Jimmy's face, and he's finally gonna get this huge case that he's been working for, and Betsy's hand just quietly like touches his hand, and then the look on Jimmy's face as that happens is great.
I was laying on my couch. I was like, "This bitch, he needs this," and you just see the smile go off of Jimmy's face. I'm just like, "Fuck."
So when I first watched that scene, because I obviously wasn't paying too much attention to the dialogue, like I was saying, I thought it was just Jimmy has always been a defense attorney, like public defense attorney. So this is going to be his first private clients.
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, I think it's still a fair assumption. I don't think it changes too much of the meaning of the scene too much.
It was definitely his first big break, no matter how you slice it.
It was going to be his first big break. But I think that once again ties into the fact of Jimmy is trying to be the good guy lawyer. Like, he's trying to separate himself as far as he can from his previous persona. But he's pretty much going cold turkey into it, and he doesn't understand how to like properly like go through the ranks and figure things out.
Right on. So next big scene we get to look into Jimmy's living situation, where he has to walk into a nail salon, which Bradley, as you'll recall, Saul always had a thing for nail salons. He tried to get that as their money laundering business, like on 2 or 3 different occasions. That and laser tag in Breaking Bad. But
yeah, as soon as I saw him go into a nail salon, that was kind of I think that was the first moment where I was like, okay, this is where you kind of start getting rewarded, maybe, for if you had seen Breaking Bad before this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't care. I was just like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it makes sense even if you haven't.
I wouldn't have bat an eye.
This is interesting with our format, is you get to see if stuff works because of this is a fun little connection, or if it just works because it's good storytelling.
Yeah, that's why I kind of like that we have the triple threat here.
Anyways, his office, he has to walk into the laundry room and then walk deeper in there to get to his little office, which
I was like, poor guy.
He gets a check, and then so this is something I really like with Vince Gilligan and Peter Gould's storytelling, because you're gonna have to get into the habit of calling out Peter Gould because he's a huge part of this show, as much as
Peter.
Vince. Go Peter. You get these scenes where you don't really know what's going on until later. So he gets that check, and you see it's for $26,000, and he has to rip it with a grimace in his face. What did y'all first think of that?
I really liked it, because almost every scene leading up to this check rip was like kind of highlighting how starved for money he is and how desperate he is.
Right.
He's arguing about like he only got the 700 and all this shit. Like, even before he hits the guys on the skates, I think like bad shit was happening with his car, and we see he has this dingy little office in the back of a nail salon. So we're just hammering home like how financially struggling he is. And then it's like, oh wow, $26,000 check, and he barely hesitates before ripping it.
I think this show is the god of show don't tell.
Yeah.
So much is just being shown without having to highlight. It's really crazy. This brings us into our first scene at the HHM offices. So there's a lot to talk about here. As soon as he gets to the lobby, or not the lobby, he has to come in through the underground. And there's that beat up trash can there that comes up later in the scene. He takes a look at it,
Ooh.
and then he moves on, and you're left with this impression. It's like, why did he look at the beat up trash can? It's almost as if he knows what he's about to do to it when he comes back down, because it's that
it is so
habitual. Furthermore, when Jimmy's in the offices proper, he's playing like his charismatic card. Every single attorney and associate there is so immediately done with his shit. You can tell he's been here so many times and has a history here that they're like, hey, you so and so, and they're like, hey, Jimmy, they're up there in the office, they're waiting for you. And then
I think the front desk lady, he's like, from what I can tell, had like a previous relationship with or worked with or something.
he
That was the person.
well, you'll learn more about his relationship with HHM later, but you can definitely tell that they know him and he knows them. One line I really like is like, hey, well groomed as always, and the dude's just like, okay.
All right.
That keeps walking away. So, all right, we walk into the boardroom proper. I want to bring in the new gimmick for this show. This is a attorney show,
Ooh.
so we need evidence. So I submit to the court evidence 1-1.
I like this. This is cool.
On our midcast chat.
Wouldn't this be one? This be 1-A. You don't double numbered.
Shut the fuck up. It's 1-1.
It's 1-A.
I'm a criminal lawyer. I don't follow those rules.
It's 1-A, because if you do 1-1, that gets confusing because there's just a bunch of numbers.
It's World 1, Level 1.
Yeah.
No, that's Mario.
That's the famous. All right. So we're talking about a TV show, and it's important to highlight how good this show is shot. And it's not something I can always talk about. And unfortunately, it's not something that will be very clear in a podcast format, but I can at least send y'all certain visuals to help you understand what I'm saying. So, this character Kim here, for some reason, she sticks out in this boardroom. One, she's the only female here, but I think also the framing of the camera. You have Jimmy, but then you have Hamlin in the center, but Kim is directly opposed from Jimmy. So the framing makes you kind of draw your attention to first Hamlin, but then Kim. And I think it's interesting how Vince and Peter are able, and all the directors are able to highlight certain characters. If y'all remember when we met Lydia Bradley, it's a kind of a small scene, but she's in a boardroom with a bunch of other German guys in Breaking Bad. But for some reason she sticks out a little bit, and I think they're really good at just making people stick out in really subtle ways to make you understand that they're more important without spelling it out necessarily.
Yeah. And even like, aside from framing her, which this shot is obviously meant to be doing, it's just laid out in a very attractive way. I think like the rule of thumb that most people know for visual design is the rule of thirds, where you don't usually want to, if you're composing an image, you don't want to like cut the image in half. Things are usually more attractively laid out in thirds.
Yeah.
And in this particular shot, the one third on the left half of the screen is almost entirely black and much closer to the foreground.
And it's Jimmy too. It's
yeah. And the other 2/3 are much brighter. And even then, going vertical wise, the top third of the screen on the right side is void, and the bottom third actually has our characters. I just feel like this was a very purposeful camera angle. It's just laid out very nicely.
Well, let me hit you with 1-B, which is also another really cool camera angle from here. This one just looks cool with all these lights in the middle. Now, lights are a really big thing to keep an eye for because of a certain character that is very important to the story, which we'll meet in a little bit. But also, I like how the framing here kind of looks like that painting of
It's like the Last Supper.
It's a Last Supper-esque painting, so it makes you feel like there's a betrayal that's happening here.
Well,
with
also, like
Howard and Chuck.
You look at Hamlin's head; he has that kind of like classic halo ring that's usually put on Renaissance painting, based on like the you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Cabinet or some shit. I was seeing that when you're in your thing. There's a shot previous, so I'm gonna see if I can get it.
Submit
I don't
the
know if I'll be
evidence
able to
to
get
the
that from
court.
Netflix, but there's a point where Saul comes in and his hands are outstretched to the side, and
Yeah.
you're seeing from the back as he looks into the others.
And the room is warped too in that shot when you're looking from the back. Very interesting.
Do we want to edit these in for the viewers, or that's up to
Do we
you? Because
want to? No. Will I?
you, the
Maybe.
editor.
It doesn't do anything for the podcast listeners.
Okay,
So, anyways, something I like about the show a lot is that this is more of a technical aspect of just TV shows in general. But like basically, when you make a set, you generally don't make a whole room.
Yeah.
You generally just make the front you're going to shoot, and you kind of just use that the entire time. What I've been really liking about the show is that it takes very creative camera angles and shots that you wouldn't usually see, and like when they're moving the camera and everything. It's probably because they're actually like using this actual boardroom space and everything.
I think they use a lot of full sets in actual places. Yeah.
Yeah, which benefits from that, but I just like to call it out because I really like it when we don't get that static frame of a set or something, and where we're like we always see everything that's in there, but we get those creative shots like that. So it's just something I really like about the cinematography of it, and like that even goes to movies, because movies can be very boringly shot sometimes, but the angles and like you get these low angles sometimes, and you get these like over the shoulder ones that provide some interesting outlooks. There's a camera technique that happens later between two characters that I want to bring up because I just think it's interesting to the conversation that's happening.
Nice. Yeah, the show has a lot of mundane stuff that it somehow retches up to be as intense as possible, even though it's mundane. So I think with the camera work here, it's helping all that. Finally, the last gorgeous shot of this extended scene is the shot of Kim smoking as Jimmy's walking away.
this one really jumped out to me. I really loved this image.
This is, again, such good show don't tell. Kim is already there waiting for him. She knows he comes down this way every time. He does this multiple times. She knows where to find him. He walks up to her. She was in the boardroom, so you're like, wait, dude, are they friends? He takes the cigarette from her mouth, he puts it in his mouth, and puts it back. So there's this really intimate show of like, oh, they were really close at some point.
Yeah, it's like they don't need dialogue to show how familiar these two are with
Oh.
each other. You just know.
There's something about the scene that I really, really like when he's going downstairs and he kicks the trash can and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is that it's just the use of lighting, and the use of lighting in this first episode is really good. But like he starts off fully lit in this room in the door, and he kicks the trash can over, and he finally is finished kicking it. And then as soon as he steps outside, he's just completely casted in shadows.
Mm-hmm.
And then he moves over to Kim,
And then he's lighter now.
and he's in the light. So it's kind
there's
of
this
almost
dark
like-
patch in the middle where he was still super
Right.
angry, but being next to Kim is brightening him up.
That's what that was kind of getting at, is that like she's just like an important aspect in his life and kind of keeps him, I guess, grounded for later.
The one dialogue that is in this scene is also really good. Jimmy says, "Couldn't you just? You know I couldn't."
Yeah,
And that's all. And you could just tell that they're kind of dynamic from there.
and I feel like also part of it too is that she may be the only thing that's really stopping him from going off on everyone here,
Yeah, yeah.
because she works here, and obviously they have a close relationship of some sort. So it's like if she wasn't here, he might actually just not give a fuck about anything else here anymore and really try to tear him down.
Right on. But there's another important link here, which is the next big scene. We get to meet the character of Chuck in this really bizarre scene where... How long did it take y'all to realize what the problem with Chuck was?
I'm still not sure I do know what the problem with Chuck is.
Cool.
He doesn't like electricity.
That's what y'all got? All right, it'll become more clear. We'll leave it at that. It's the classic mystery box storytelling.
I just thought he was a psycho.
Well,
Yeah, he's like a tinfoil hat guy. Like, oh, the electricity.
Magnetic waves are making me like go funky fried.
so what's super interesting is that even though he is this weird guy, he's obviously so smart. As soon as Jimmy walks in, he's spitting Latin, he's throwing out case files, he's clearly got this knowledge of the law, and Jimmy's listening to all of his words, and Jimmy clearly cares about him. So from his interest in his speech, you can see how knowledgeable he is.
Yeah, I was like, this isn't just a demented old man. Like, he actually knows his shit, and this is why these people want him to come back so fucking bad.
Right. So we'll leave it at that. Chuck is
They don't want him to
fascinating.
come back.
Is that
Well,
what I thought they were trying to get him to come back?
No, the whole
Yeah.
point is that they're trying to just slowly like pay him so he doesn't come back, and eventually he dies, and they can take over.
Oh
But
yeah,
if
whenever he
chooses
dies,
to
that's
withdraw from the investment, they have to pay him out.
Well, I won't butt into this, but that's cool how y'all have different interpretations here. We'll see how that plays out. This is the first scene where Jimmy's identity is really challenged. And I forgot which line it was in particular, but Chuck has this line where he challenges Jimmy's identity as a lawyer. And these are the kind of things that Jimmy will struggle with, especially in these first few episodes. You get to see a lot of it coming up. Do y'all know what Chuck's relationship to Jimmy is yet?
He's his brother.
Yeah. It can take people episodes to figure that out. I've watched people react to the show, and they don't highlight it. And Vince even says, we don't have a line there where we're like, Chuck, how long have we been brothers? Like, you're supposed to figure out on your own when it finally strikes.
It's kind of like from the way they talk to each other.
Yeah. You get the scene at the skate park. I really like this shot here of Jimmy telling the tale of
We're just gonna skip over this entire scene.
which one?
The one where he's in the house.
With
He's
Chuck?
talking to him.
All right, what you got?
Okay, so do you know what the rule of 180 degrees is in
Yes.
film?
Yes.
Okay, so if you don't know what that is, basically when you are filming, you want to make sure your actors are on the same side of the screen, regardless of where your shot is coming from. So like if you have a wide shot and you see a person on the left and you see a person on the right, you want to shoot it so you are your audience knows that they're still on the left and they are still on the right.
Yeah, when you see them from profile, it's consistently.
Yeah. So there's a point here where they're sitting on the couch, and they're having a discussion, and the scene rotates and breaks that rule.
The
Which
rule
I
of
found interesting.
the rule of 180 is most interesting when it's broken, and I
Yeah.
feel like it's broken. I would need to rewatch it when
When it's
Jimmy's
broken
identity
properly,
is
not when it's just done haphazardly.
right. But yeah, I think it's broken when Jimmy's identity is challenged, and I
Yeah.
guess Chuck has an upper hand in a way with his.
Well, it starts off, we're looking more behind Chuck, he's to the left, and we're facing, and Jimmy's the one that we can see our facial view for in the wide shot, and we're doing our reverse shots, and then when Jimmy is finally challenged, it flips where we see Jimmy's back as he's now on the defense, and Chuck is coming at him.
So, here's the story of Slippin' Jimmy. When Jimmy is challenged with his Slipping Jimmy ways, how does he combat that? By reverting to Slippin' Jimmy. So he gets these two knuckleheads to go in on a decent plan, quote unquote, to get the Kettlemans to work for him, get himself to work for the Kettleman. And it goes horribly wrong. That whole skate thing goes
Like all good plans do.
like all good plans do. They just happen to get hit by an old Mexican lady who did not know enough English to stay at the scene, so she just flees.
That poor lady.
That poor
At the
lady.
same time.
And then Jimmy tracks her down, and he walks in, and a gun meets him in the face, and he's met by good old Tuco, who, this is the first point where watching Breaking Bad is you're really, really rewarded for it. So, Joe, what did you think of like just seeing this man with a gun? Did you have any thoughts in particular?
This man's a gangster.
Cool.
He's a gangstar.
G.
Bradley, what did you think?
I was like, I mean, if I didn't know that Saul is a character in Breaking Bad, but I did know who Tuco was, I'd be like, he's dead. Like, he's gonna die.
Tuco is terrifying, Joe, and you get
He's
to
very
see some
scary.
of it as we move on to episode 2.
Kind of as a retrospective of episode 1.
One thing I do want to mention is that I really like the Saul looking down into the lion's pit kind of thing.
Yeah.
In the skate park where he's looking down on two chuckle fucks. And
Chuckle and fuck.
yeah, basically. trilogy and trilogy. But like I like the idea of Saul or Jimmy knows that he's at a higher level than these guys, but he has to bring himself down to them to get what he wants.
He's gonna make them into slippin' jimmies.
Yeah, he's entering the pit of the beast to get them to come do what he needs to do.
That's cool. What was your retrospective, Bradley, that you had?
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting to contrast the pilots of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, because I feel like Breaking Bad, the pilot works a lot more as a standalone.
Yeah.
Like if the pilot of Breaking Bad came out and there were never any episodes after it and it was just its own kind of short film,
It'd be a good short film, yeah.
yeah, I think it stands pretty well on its own. This is clearly setting up for a long story, which, I mean, I'm not saying anything counts against that. I think they're both great pilots. I think it's just I think it's cool that there were kind of different approaches taken to each of them.
Honestly, like because I had Netflix going in, which is auto playing, I totally forgot that this episode ends with Jimmy being dragged into the house.
Yeah.
Because the end of the second episode, when he wins his first court trial, is kind of why I saw as the end of this kind of arc almost.
Right. I feel like episode 2 is the end of, that could be your pilot, I guess. It would be a longer pilot.
Yeah, if they were given like, how long is this episode? It's
they're all about an hour, 40 to an hour.
If it was like an hour and a half, they could have ended it there. And you have a really good arc of like him losing a court case, and then he has to win the court case out in the desert. But yeah,
The street court case.
And another thing I thought was cool was kind of his mini arc over the course of this first episode, where, you know, he feels the need to scam the Kettlemans into taking him on.
Yeah.
Because kind of like Joe said, you know, at the beginning of this episode, he is actually earnestly trying to do things the right way. He's obviously been Slippin' Jimmy in the past, but he's kind of at a point where he's kind of trying to do things by the book, do his public defender work, get the check. But he just isn't really rewarded by the universe for playing things well, so he has to resort to doing these tactics. And I really liked it. It reminded me, one of my professors at A&M, she was it was a cybersecurity risk class. It was funny, the professor teaching it, she was an attorney for like 2 decades before she went back to college and
Jesus Christ,
became a professor. And she said she really hated attorney work, and she said the main thing she took away from it was that it's not that bad people become lawyers, it's that law school turns people into bad people.
That's a cool
because
line.
she says there's a lot of situations where you kind of have to be scummy if you want to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmy would cream at that line.
Yeah.
And it's not even like it's kind of a thing where it's not because it's the nature of the beast kind of deal. Like it's a sink or swim where you have to be this way or you're going to get stepped on.
Yeah. All right. Episode 1-1X2. We got, I believe this one is called Miho, which means...
Miho
is like it's like a doting name for a grandson.
There you go.
Which is what Tuco is to his grandma, which is where we start up. And
So I like this opening where we go back in time a little bit before the ending of our first episode and we get a different perspective to the events for the Chuckle Fucks.
yeah. Chuckle and Fuck walk in, they're like, this biznatch hit me.
Ooh.
And that was a trigger word for old Tuco here.
It's funny, or like Vince Gilligan almost never starts an episode immediately where the other one left off. He'll either do like a cold open, or he'll do a flash forward, or he'll show like the previous scene from another perspective. It's almost never like you go from the end of this episode immediately to the start of the next episode.
And that holds true here. I like how you get that really close shot of him chopping the peppers. It just looks jarring, and you're not sure where you're looking at first.
Tuco loves cooking.
This scene is just really tense. And if there's anything you can give to Tuco as far as like a redeeming quality, this guy loves his family and his elders so much.
He loves his
Family
grandma.
is everything.
Yeah, family is everything. That is the Salamanca way. Something to keep in mind as we go through the show. Jimmy walks in. You get the little salsa scene as he's trying to clean up the blood that he left from Chuckle and Fuck.
He didn't even use club soda. What an idiot.
The grandma really specified the club soda.
Yeah. I have a question.
What's up?
Are Chuckle and Fuck twins, or is that the same actor that they just put in twice?
They're
They've
twins.
got to be twins, right?
Yeah, they're twins. They talk about how they get them.
God, they're douchebags.
Oh, dude, they got into the show because their rehearsal was just them fucking around on the skateboard, and they're like, "That's the ones. Those are the ones." I like when Saul or Jimmy starts talking and Tuco's just listening, and Jimmy's just going on and on. He's like trying to assess the situation as he's speaking, and Tuco just says, "Man, you got a mouth."
Mm-hmm.
So he's about to let Jimmy go, but alas, Chuckle and fuck the situation up, and we're in the desert.
Yeah, whenever they ripped off the tape on his mouth, and he's like, "Oh, it was all his idea," because I was like, "Man, that's a bold strategy." Because it's like,
So what's great about
oh god,
this scene, and so what's great about, so okay, so I really, really, really liked this whole segment. I thought it was a really creative way of emphasizing how a courtroom works.
The desert scene.
oh yeah, they're negotiating the torture.
Yeah, so
of
the
these
whole
guys,
the
like,
whole
sentences.
thing between.
Let's hold on. Let's slow down. There's a little bit to get to before we get there, because I think
Right.
I know where you're getting with that one.
Okay, because basically, from the moment where Jimmy enters the house and they get to the hospital, is a summary proceedings of what it's like to be a lawyer and you have an idiot client get detained and by the police. Because Tuco in this situation is the police, essentially. Is the prosecution and the police department that have captured criminals.
And the judge, fair
And
but
the
tough.
judge, basically. They are judge, jury, and executioner. But, like, the number one rule is whenever you get arrested is you don't talk, period.
Right.
Like, you don't do anything until a lawyer shows up. And these chuckle fucks,
They can't help
the
it, man.
first thing they do is talk.
They can't help it. So
Yeah.
I really love how just beautiful. So the lighting in this show is so bright compared to Breaking Bad, which like it has some bright scenes, but also has a lot of like grimy desert scenes. I feel like so many shots in these early episodes of Better Call Saul are so like just blindingly light, because you have this really horrible torture scene with this beautiful blue sky in the background, this nice open desert. It's a very uncanny setting for this kind of scene.
Yeah, it's very candid for a torture scene.
We get the introduction to Nacho, who is clearly an intelligent criminal, and anyone who can handle Tuco the way Nacho does gets my respect.
Yeah. Nacho is the prosecution for this point.
Nacho would be the prosecution, you're right.
Yeah, I think Nacho was a really good introduction to this scene. I think we really needed a. I mean, he's not the opposite of Tuco, but I really think we needed him more.
He's the opposite. He's the front of Chico in this scene, and that's why he's
In
necessary.
this scene, he's the opposite, but like not.
As far as a criminal, I'd say he's a totally opposite than Tuco, because Tuco's such a hot-headed, like,
Yeah.
when they're like Operation Kingbreaker, Tuco's like, that means I'm the king. That should really tell you everything you need to know about how Tuco treats crime. But you know, Nacho is nice and calm, and so he's like, all right, what kind of drugs do we sell? Just to break his thing. He's like, all right, now you got to tell me the actual truth, or else Tuco's going to do terrible things to you. So really,
I think-
he's the only reason why Jimmy survives the scene.
Yeah, so I think the good point about this scene is that Jimmy doing that lie pretty much saves his life, not because it would make Tuco back away, but it kind of proves to Nacho that, like, oh, he was telling the truth in the first place, because why on earth would he just go back and say the same thing again?
Yeah. It was a
the other
well-constructed
point-
scene, I'd say.
Yeah, the other thing is that it lets Saul realize that he has to kind of come to terms with the people he is defending, like 99% of the time, are guilty, and he has to come to that fact, and he has to admit that. And so the best he can do is to lighten their sentence as much as possible and negotiate. He shouldn't try to stick his neck out to save someone completely, but he can try to lower their sentences. This is the point where he realizes the change of like what his process needs to be as a lawyer.
We'll table that because it comes up in a little
Yeah.
bit too. But yeah, this is a huge court case as Jimmy is trying to play Tuco and give him the fair sentence. And you know what? That's a pretty good sentence, all things considered. Considering what was going to happen to them when
Yeah.
they're like, "You're the worst lawyer ever. I just got you from life down to a 6-month probation. I'm the best lawyer ever."
Yeah, I love that line.
Man, this entire scene where he's negotiating with Tuco and Nacho, this is exactly the kind of scene I was excited for when, we signed up for a show in which Saul is the main character, because one of the most fascinating things about him for me has always been his ability to talk his way through really, really bad situations.
Yeah.
And this was just a prime example of it.
But one thing that's important about this show is that Jimmy is likable. Jimmy is a scummy dude, but he's likable. And they showed in this scene because Jimmy had the complete way to get out. They're like, all right, they'll drive you back to your car. And he has too much of a guilty conscience to let the chuckle fucks get killed. He didn't need to. And he stuck his neck out. That could have gone horribly. Tuco could have gotten more aggressive with Jimmy and killed him. But he stuck his neck out for them, and he saved their lives.
Yeah, and he did this even though they even tried to scam him at one point when he had no dimes left to his name.
Right. And so we get episode 1 where the first thing we see is Jimmy lose a case, and then we have Jimmy winning this huge crime case. I think that's a nice little arc there. Like you were saying, there's a small arc in these episodes we did watch. Did you notice that guy where Tuco's like, "Stop helping," is the guy who he killed in season 2? That's just a little funny throwback.
I think I recognized his fat henchman first.
Yeah, that's not Combo. Combo's another dude. Rest in peace. Anyways, so the leg breaking scene, just horrifying. The sounds, the way that they're just like yucking it up about that. I like how Nacho is watching like quietly from the back. Like he's clearly not taking pleasure in it.
I'm usually pretty good about stuff like that, but I actually kind of, I was kind of
the
turning
pain.
away.
The pain would be insane. We follow this up with the amazing date scene. This scene is editorial masterpiece, man. Jimmy's on this date with this, I guess, when you're older, bombshell lady who's totally into him, totally giving him the look, and she's got this red lipstick and the red nails, and she's playing with her cup, and everything's going well. A lot of sexual tension.
Ooh.
But then that red turns a little more grim when those breadsticks start breaking.
Oh yeah.
And that red now becomes a reminder of blood. And those breadsticks start reminding you of the legs that were broken. And Jimmy's just losing it. And the music starts getting distorted the deeper the scene goes. It's so good. Oh. But yeah. We get the post-date scene at Chuck's. So Jimmy shows up completely drunk. And here we get a snapshot of Chuck taking care of Jimmy. Clearly they have some, like, they're pretty close considering Jimmy has to take care of Chuck and his craziness, and Chuck is able to reciprocate. And the worries of slipping Jimmy coming back start to surface, and Jimmy does not want Chuck to think of him that way, which I think goes very nicely into the following scene where he's working really hard as a straight-edge, straight-laced lawyer. What did y'all think of in the scene with Chuck? He's like, "Take off the space blanket, Chuck," and he repeats it like 2 or 3 times until Chuck does it. Did that stick out to y'all at all?
I enjoyed it just because I think it gave me a little bit more context for the relationship. Chuck isn't like exclusively a superior to Jimmy.
Yeah.
Like Jimmy is gonna be able to influence his behavior.
I think the big thing for me is that, like Chuck, like seems to have like this kind of almost mistrust for Jimmy that he could easily latch on to, because previously before he had the phone, he's freaking about the phone and he throws it out. So it very much was like when that happened, Chuck's immediate thought was to start protecting himself and to like create a barrier rather than be there for Jimmy, kind of, or be more open with Jimmy, because Jimmy recognizes that barrier made by the tinfoil space blanket kind of thing, and doesn't and wants to have him take it off essentially. You know, like
Yeah.
he doesn't want to have to deal with this barrier that his brother's like putting up that isn't justified.
Cool. I'll touch up on this scene later, but I think that's a good read on it. This goes into the hard-working lawyer montage, which is again just so well edited. You get this one shot here of Jimmy walking into the court and immediately walking out with another client. How the fuck did they even shoot this? It's so cool. Um, there's actually a couple of
It's
like
just compositing. You
Ye-
just you take two, you shoot it, and then you just cut the thing in half and you put it together.
but there's
Yeah.
a dude walking through the middle.
Yeah, that's easy. You just that guy is a different shot entirely. That they don't move anything. They take everything out of the background of that one guy, and they just put him in front, and then he walks forward.
Still a lot of editing, Joe. All right.
I'm not saying it wasn't hard work. I'm just saying that's how they did it. I'm not saying they cloned two Jimmys. Although they could.
I'm saying they cloned two Jimmys. I'm just saying. But yeah, there's actually some really cool like the camera stays still, but a lot of stuff happens. Like one where he's in the court and he's just bouncing from argument to argument, and at one point he's like, "To make some cookies," and you have no idea what it's referring to, but it's just great.
Yeah, I thought that was fun.
And you just get this. It's basically just him working super hard to go against what Chuck fears he'll become.
Yeah, he's grinding.
He's grinding.
I really like how he has an interaction with the prosecutor lawyer over
Yeah.
time, where he goes petty with a
Petty with a briar. Petty with a
Yeah.
briar. Good point to your negotiating. Like now we get to see Jimmy negotiating a lot more.
And it kind of accumulates to him breaking down this guy eventually. That's why I really like it, is that you can see the progress that's being made by Jimmy in some small respect.
Finally, the episode closes off with the Nacho coming to Jimmy's office scene. What I really like about this from the get-go is that when Nacho comes in, he doesn't sit in the chair. He sits on the couch, which is also Jimmy's bed. So you just immediately take it over the place. And he thinks he sees Jimmy's true nature. And Jimmy, no, I'm a straight edge lawyer. I won't help you with this. You want to make a score on the Kettleman? I'm not going to help. Yada yada. What did y'all think of this scene?
I think Nacho I think he had a pretty good read going in. I think he knew he was going to be able to kind of influence Jimmy in the way that he did.
Yeah, he leaves those matchsticks there with his number. He's like, for when you realize you're in the game. And I guess we'll see where that goes as we move into episode 3, which starts with Jimmy in prison. So we don't really get to figure out what he was locked up here for. Were you able to pick it up from the context clues?
He torrented season 3 of Workaholics.
How did you know? In like 2002, where the show takes place, it was crazy. I will take that as a no. But so basically, in this scene, you'll find out more about it in the future. But the important thing for now is that we get to see how Chuck went out of his way to help Jimmy when he was particularly shitty. He was not the Jimmy we know today. He was definitely in an even lower state. In his
and lights.
Yeah, and I like Chuck with his time skipped hair. They used, or time reversed hair. They use this trick where like all flashback scenes are shot in like low lighting, so you don't get to see any of the imperfections of the makeup. Pretty consistently done throughout the show. You get Jimmy in the nail salon. He's drinking the cucumber water because it's nighttime. So fuck you, Mrs. Nguyen. He's just gonna drink it. He's calling Kim, and you get a good sense of their relationship when he's talking to her. She's like, Jimmy, I'm not gonna talk dirty to you, and you're not gonna talk dirty to me. He's like, well, dang. And the guilty conscience starts coming in. He starts asking Kim, theoretically, if the Kettleman did steal the money, they could be in danger, right? And she's like, why are you bringing this up? He hangs up. He says, I'm no hero, but then he goes out of his way to try to warn the Kettleman.
He also enrolls an entire roll of things.
Of paper?
Yeah.
To get the sex robot voice? Jimmy is scum, don't forget. So we find out the Kettlemen are missing. What was y'all's first idea of what happened here? Did you just think Nacho did it?
No,
I don't think I didn't expect that they had disappeared themselves, but I didn't buy that Nacho had done it.
I didn't buy the Nacho did it either. I thought it was like,
Would be too obvious, right?
I thought it was like
Yeah.
even another third party we didn't know about.
yeah, there was some sort of third party that was in the Breaking Bad universe that was going to get revealed later, kind of deal.
No, it just turns out to be the two greatest criminals in the land, Betsy and Craig Kittleman.
Betsy and
work.
Craig,
Um,
Bonnie and Clyde.
Bonnie and Clyde. So we get Nacho in custody, which that's when we get the great twist. They had nothing to do with it, and we get to see how terrifying he is. Where if you don't get me out of here by tomorrow, you're a dead man. I like when Jimmy is arguing with the cops. He like gets his mouth next to the window and starts yelling, "My client has rights!" and all this to just impress Nacho. Jimmy's a fucking goofball.
Yeah, and I was actually rooting really hard in this episode for Jimmy just because obviously I want him to live, but also I think he just kind of needed this personal victory in his life right now.
Jimmy's really easy to root for, despite his failings. Like, you can tell he works hard. One thing you can't say about Jimmy is that he's a half-asser. He works really hard to bend the rules.
It's ironic because you could say that a person that does insurance fraud is a half-asser, almost, because they're basically faking their own. They're basically just scamming people out of insurances out on money.
But he puts his heart into it.
Yeah.
A criminal with a heart. So we get really big Ace Attorney Jimmy moments as they're investigating the house. I liked his reasoning.
Investigation day.
Yeah, investigation 1 part 1. I really liked how his rationale came about. He's like, "Oh, where's the doll?" But then I like how the cops had a good counter example. As he's leaving, you get the thing with Mike, where Mike comes out and just completely dominates Jimmy physically, despite being an old man. One funny thing about watching this after Breaking Bad is how the characters have all aged way more, but it's in the past, so you just kind of have to go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jimmy in season 5 looks old, man. I gotta say. I like how when Mike realizes the truth of the situation, he decides to help Jimmy. Why did y'all think he decided to do that?
I thought he was just Monkey D. Luffy and just had ultimate emotional identification skills.
God, there is no two characters I would compare less than Monkey D. Luffy and Mike Ehrmantraut. But you're right.
No, I just thought of it more as Mike is a person of his own, like, convictions, that he has his own kind of set of morals and like has the classic idea of what it means to be a man and standing up for yourself and standing up for what you believe in. And he kind of saw that Jimmy would never, like, because as many times as Jimmy did when it came to like coming to this fucking validation thing, he always went back up and got his fucking stamps again, even however many times he got argued with it. So like he knew that like he'll go out of his way to get what's supposed to be done.
That's true. Yeah, that's a good read on this interaction in relation to all their stamp interactions.
Yeah.
I think whatever Mike sees as his duty is what he's going to be very committed to. Like Joe was saying, it's all this shit that Jimmy does to Mike when he's like cussing him out and stuff. Mike doesn't actually really hold on to that. He doesn't strike me as having a grudge against Jimmy. It's just like he's doing his job, he's doing his duty. And so whenever they get the whole story about the Kettlemans, and Mike decides that Jimmy's right, it's not really that he's on Jimmy's team now or that he's against Jimmy. He's just like, yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think this is what happened, so I'm going to say so. And
he has experience with it, as he has his past with a cop, which we knew from Breaking Bad, but now we know for Joe as well. I really like this line that they end with, where nobody wants to leave home. That's a line we should hold on to for a couple more episodes, probably for next talk. We finally get to Jimmy's search, which is just a really well-shot scene. And you can tell he's just looking for a long time because his life is in danger. And he fucking finds it, man.
And then we see the real crime that the Kettlemans have done.
Making
Make
their
kids sing shitty campfire songs.
the kids are so done. Shout outs to JoJo Kettleman, Part 9 for life. Uh, and then we bust into the tent with a "Here's Johnny."
He scared the shit out of him.
They went way the fuck out there.
You could tell they were a camping family from their little stickers on their car, which I thought was a nice touch. So
Yeah, but
you get the sense that they're cool, where they're usually hiking, but really this is some really dumb criminals just trying to buy time to figure out what to do without understanding the situation they're in.
And man, I was like really happy for Jimmy right here because like finding these people, not only is it probably going to save his life, but also he's really been looking for kind of a break, like something to get his name out there. So, this could be it for him.
Well, I guess we'll have to find out what happens when they actually interact in episode 4
No.
next time on Journey with Jimmy. I have one final well, I have two final questions. These are very important. Do you think Mrs. Kettleman is hot? Betsy Kettleman? Yes,
no.
No?
Nah.
All right. I submit to the court 3-1.
Oh, he's ready. Oh my god.
Okay, I've changed my mind.
Okay, well, technically, this isn't Betsy Kettleman.
That's
It's
true.
the same
That's not
actress
Betsy
playing a
Kettleman.
different
That's
lady.
just the actor.
Betsy Kettleman's got that, like, fuck you energy where it's like, yeah, all right. That's...
God damn.
Where's this film? Where can I watch it? And why is she not Nico Robin?
Willard just sent us the hottest gif of all time.
I mean, we submit evidence to this court. All right, my closing question here is: what are your early opinions on Chuck, Kim, Howard, and Nacho?
Let's see. Nacho is a criminal that understands the situation in terms of like from the criminal side, but doesn't understand it from the police side of things. Like he doesn't get the lawyer process at all. Really, he can understand finding out the truth, but he can't understand the process that it goes through. Essentially,
I think he understands very well. He's just like, fucking get it done, Jimmy. They cannot look into my business.
I guess so. Yeah. Who were the other people?
Chuck, Howard, and Kim.
Which one's Howard?
Howard is Hamlin, the blonde guy.
Oh yes, okay. Chuck's the psycho who it was a great Mr. Man and then had an accident, and I was just fearful of all things with magnets. Hamlin is the one that was slowly poisoning him in his coffee so that one day he could take over the family fortune, and until his stepbrother Jimmy chimed in and stopped him.
Stepbrother? Okay. We're adding lore.
What are you doing, step bro?
It was a JoJo reference.
Oh, it was. It really was. Now, what did you really think? And what about Kim?
I feel like Kim is like on the fence of everything. Like she knows what Kim knows what they're doing is wrong to Hamlin, or not Hamlin, to Chuck. Like she knows it, and she knows that, and she understands Jimmy's point of view. But she's also looking out for herself, and she knows that if she tries to stand up and tries to not get try to stop Hamlin from doing what he's trying to do, that would cost her job, which means that she's on the street and probably wouldn't be able to get another law job later. So she's in a difficult situation where she has personal ties to Jimmy and Chuck, but she needs to look after herself first.
Bradley?
Yeah. I think Kim is going to be really interesting because of how she kind of grounds Jimmy right now. And I think as the show goes on and his morals get more tested and he gets involved in shadier practices, I think their relationship with each other, platonic relationship, is going to get it could get very strained, and I'm ready to see how that develops.
What about the other characters?
I didn't have a ton of thoughts about Howard.
Okay.
But Nacho, I thought was extremely interesting. Because like obviously I've seen Tuco in a villainous role before, and he's very terrifying because of how just overly violent he is. So I like that we kind of get a a counterpart in Nacho in Better Call Saul. So I the way he's portrayed right now, I can't really tell if he's just going to be a very short-lived character or a longer run. So I'm interested to see how that's going to go.
And Chuck.
Chuck, I think a lot about Chuck right now, as far as like his background, what's happening to him, his relationship with everyone else in the show. A lot of it is still kind of wreathed in mystery for me.
Yeah.
So I might hold off on that.
It was worth noting that in the flashback with Chuck, we see him put his big phone away
Ooh.
in the tin as he's visiting Jimmy. So that was at a time where it seemed like he had no problems with phones. So just worth mentioning. All right, I think that does it for this first episode. I keep watching this GIF on loop on the side. I should put it away. Yeah, that's what we got. Thank y'all for watching. Leave any questions that you might want to ask the boys here. Let me know what y'all think of the format. And yeah, that's what we got. Bye.
Bye.